Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at recruiting firm Riderflex. If you enjoyed today's guest interview, please give it a like and be sure to subscribe to the Riderflex podcast. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Anna, where are you today? What city are you in? Are you in New York? And if you are in New York, what part of town? Where are you?
I am in New York. I'm in New York. I'm in meatpacking. We actually just moved into a new office that we're sharing with another startup. And this is day, I think, 3 in the new office, which is why I have this amazing background with guitars and everything on the wall for those who are watching. So yeah, it's a good part of New York to be. It's very buzzing.
And the guitars, what's up with that? Did you play?
Actually, no, but it's funny that we did actually kind of came together to the same office with another audio startup. So they're called Musician. They are actually an app that helps you, learn to play different instruments. And so the guitars are theirs. I do not know how to play, unfortunately.
Oh, but it's a cool backdrop, right? I mean,
it's a very cool backdrop. Yeah. And, we're in audio, so, it makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, before we get into business, tell me about Anna, the person. I want to know family, mom, dad, history, siblings, where you grew up. Give me the personal story.
Yeah, so I have probably a very kind of different background from a lot of the people here. So I grew up in a country that, many, see as one of the best countries in the world to grow up and to live, and the happiest nation and all that, which is Finland. And I think that actually growing up in Finland probably played a very big role in who I became as a person and the opportunities that I saw later on in life, right? Because, I grew up when I was as a kid, Finland had a female president, right? For 12 years, I saw women leading the country, right? And, Finland is a very equal country. So that kind of equal opportunity thinking was always a part of my growing up, and I think played a very big role in me sort of wanting to achieve great things in life. But other than that, I come from like a very sort of normal family. My mom's a teacher. My dad is a sea captain.
And really?
Yes,
cool.
he's a sea
You
captain.
mean like a fisherman or for like
No, for cargo ships.
For cargo ships, I see.
He did that when I was a kid and growing up, and when I turned 6 or 7, he stopped because obviously he was away a lot, so I did not see him a lot when I was a kid growing up, and he would sail for like 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, and then he would spend 1 or 2 months at home. So I don't really remember spending a lot of time with him when I was a kid, but my mom's around, and my grandmother, and I have a younger brother, and so other than that, we're really kind of like a normal family. And then when my dad stopped sailing, he got an office job that had to do with ships. But he was sort of more at home, and we would see him every day and all that. And I think, we were very kind of like middle class family, maybe even lower middle class in a way. And I think for me and for my brother, kind of this whole notion of like hard work, education and hard work were something that was very instilled in us, because we didn't have a lot of connections, or we didn't have, tons of money. My parents always said, well, you're going to go and get yourself a good education, get yourself a good job, and you can do anything, right? So that was sort of the whole thought process, which is why I always knew from a very young age I wanted to go, get myself a university education. And in Finland, obviously, it is all free, so you can actually go do that.
Nice.
So yeah, so I grew up kind of with that thought process. Now, of course, looking back at my childhood and my kind of teenage years, I could see a lot of entrepreneurial tendencies that I did have, but nobody talked about entrepreneurship back then, right? So it wasn't a thing. Nobody said, oh, maybe you're going to be an entrepreneur. They said like, oh, you're going to be, a boss, or you're going to be a, whatever. You can be a CEO, you can be a president, but nobody said you can be an entrepreneur.
Did you what kind of kid were you? Were you a straight A student? Were you a rebel? Were you tell me about it.
I wasn't very good at school. I was actually very good. And I think part of that was because I've always been very driven. I've always had this winner mentality. I'm a Leo, but if
Oh,
someone, believes in horoscopes, but I mean, there is some truth to that, right? Like I've always kind of been the leader of the pack. And so I've always been very competitive, driven. I wanted to be the best, and that also obviously carried over to I wanted to be the best at school. I wasn't a straight A, but like pretty close to straight A student. But it
pretty
wasn't
close.
hard for me. I was pretty good. I had a good memory. I was good at languages, good at writing. Not great at math, but I tried. That was kind of one of the not straight A's. But other than that, I mean, it wasn't very hard for me, and I think a lot of the my friends around were kind of a little bit jealous because it was easy for me to get good grades. But yeah, I also kind of expected a lot from myself, but it did come relatively easy. So I'm grateful for kind of the natural gifts that I had.
Did you have your teacher or have your mom as a teacher? Did you have her in one of your classes?
No, she was teaching actually Russian language. So I
Oh,
no.
okay.
So no,
Okay.
but obviously, at home, I mean, it was because she's a teacher. Obviously, there was a lot of emphasis on like, doing your homework and things like that. But I
And
mean,
your
my
brother,
brother,
yeah,
he
was
was a
your brother a
rebel.
rebel? Oh, he
Oh, he
was.
was. Oh, yeah, because he's younger. He's 5.5 years younger, and he did not love school. He was not great at it. He hated it. He like did everything but. And so yeah, he was the rebel one. But as it always is when you're a younger sibling, like the parents don't really care that much, right? They cared so much with me, and I was great, and so I didn't give them a lot of headache. And then with him, it was more like, you'll be fine type of thing. Uh, which I thought was a little bit unfair personally, but
Okay, so you're a pretty good kid. Never gotten any major trouble.
no, actually, I did not. I was someone who I loved all sorts of like different projects and initiatives. So from a very young age, I got involved in anything possible from like student unions and student
Okay.
boards and all sorts of like youth councils and youth organizations. And I wanted to be on the board of everything or a president of everything. And I was kind of one of those kids, probably to some maybe annoyingly so, right? Like you look at someone, you're like, oh, she's probably going to be, and I actually wanted to, growing up, like when I was maybe in my teenage years and then sort of high school, started figuring out what I wanted to do in life. I actually did want to be one of two things. Either I wanted to be sort of like C-level executive at
Okay.
like a big corporate, right? Like a CMO of Nike was like one of the kind of very concrete things. It's like, I'd be great. I'd love to have an international career with a very cool brand. Love it. Or a politician. And I later on
Really?
went actually to be, I was elected to my city council when I was 23 back in Finland.
Wow. And then let me guess, you had a taste of that and you're like, no, I don't want to be in politics.
Actually, no. I interestingly I would have, but then I moved away from Finland. I graduated, did my master's, and moved abroad. And that's kind of where I was like, well, I had to choose. Had I stayed in Finland, I would have run for parliament for sure.
Do you
But
speak, I'm assuming you speak English, Swedish. Do you speak Russian?
I do speak Russian and I do speak German.
Wow. 4 languages. That's pretty good. Pretty impressive.
Five. I
5.
finished.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, wow.
Hang on.
Okay.
What did we cover? Finnish,
Yeah,
English,
yeah.
Swedish, Russian, German. Yes.
Very cool. Let me ask you before I get into your first move, since you grew up right next to Russia, I got to ask you your opinion on this deal. Are your mom and dad still alive? Are they still in Finland?
Well, actually, they are in Spain. So when they retired, they moved to Spain and kind of have been there for a few years now. So no longer in
Oh, I see.
Finland. And well, maybe here's a good chance for me to also share a little bit more. So my dad's Finnish. My mom's actually Russian.
Your mom's Russian.
So
Wow, this
yes.
is going to be interesting. This is
Yeah,
gonna be interesting.
exactly. Yeah. Well, since we are on the topic, yeah. So that's why I grew up bilingual, so to speak, in Finnish Russian, and then Finnish, obviously, because you're surrounded by your friends are Finnish. You go to school in Finland. Everything it became quite quickly became the primary kind of number one language. But I still speak Russian pretty well, I would say.
Is your dad originally from Spain?
And no, he's Finnish.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. So how do your parents feel? How do you and your parents feel about that, the current situation? I mean, do people in Finland, do they like all hate Putin and Russia, or is it like split, or do they support? What's the vibe over there? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Finland and Russia has always had a very interesting relationship. I don't think there's ever really been, I don't know if you can call it friendship, it's maybe more like tolerance, right? Because of the past, and obviously, Finland used to be a part of Russia, and that's who we got our independence from in 1917. And so from then onwards, there's kind of been a little bit of sometimes more, sometimes less tensions, right? And so there's this kind of tolerance, right? And I think at some point, when Russia kind of started developing, and in the very early ages when Putin got to power, right? It seemed like things in Russia were improving, and people, even in Finland, were looking at Russia saying, "Oh, you know what? Maybe it's great. Maybe they're actually moving towards, true democracy and kind of turning things around." So there were a lot of obviously Finnish tourists going to Russia, Finnish businesses, and so on. Now, lately, not just this year, but in recent years in general, looking at how things have developed, unfortunately, I think a lot of people have seen that maybe there's not as much hope as we thought originally, in them kind of moving towards more democracy and so on. And people in Finland have always thought about, there's been a lot of discussions about joining NATO before. It's always been very split in Finland. There are people that felt like we should have done that a long time ago, and some felt, no need to kind of awaken the sleeping bear. But now, majority of Finns are for joining NATO across the board, across political parties, which has been very interesting to see. Everybody's very united right now that now's the right time to do that. So it's interesting.
How do the people in Finland, generally speaking, how do they feel about us Americans? Do they think we're just a bunch of cocky cowboys and like we own the planet, or what's the?
I mean, honestly, they don't really think about you guys too much, right? I mean, to be fair, right? But I think that the American culture, is something I think that is very. It's so different from Finnish, right? I think Finland people are very, they're more introverted. They're a little bit more reserved. They don't, they're very kind of honest. You don't like story tell. You don't do small talk. You don't really talk too much to people you don't know. And in America, it's like quite the opposite. Everybody has a story, and you share it, and you talk to people, and you do small talk. And Finns oftentimes say, "Oh, Americans they're just like very they always seem to be happy, but like, are they truly like they're smiling, but are they truly happy?" And so there's a lot of yeah. So I mean, there's and I think obviously kind of in the recent years, again, what's happened in the political arena here, that certainly has started a lot of conversations in Finland as well. Unfortunately, maybe stereotyping Americans in a certain way, but yeah.
Isn't Finland ranked? I don't know what the numbers are on this, but isn't it ranked as one of the best places to live? Like the overall happiness, ranking factor, or whatever. I don't know. Is it up there?
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, I think that was like the second time or third time when Finland has been chosen as the happiest nation in the world. And it's a joke in Finland because we kind of understand that that's based on, you have a good quality of life and all that stuff. But when you look at people, like let's say they're waiting for a bus on like an October afternoon in Finland when it's cold and dark and gray, like nobody's smiling, people are kind of keep to themselves. And so they're like, who was the one thing that they surveyed who said I'm like the happiest person on the planet? Who is it? So it's gonna become a little bit of a joke, but
that's funny. It's pretty good. I appreciate you sharing that. Very interesting. So when you're going to school, your goal was to be a leader. Well, you had been a natural leader, sounds like, since you were a kid. Since you were in junior high, middle school, you were like, okay, guys, we're going this way. Follow me. Sounds like you were one of those, right?
Yeah.
So you knew you wanted to be a leader in business. And you had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, but that wasn't really talked about yet in college necessarily. Does that sound right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You get your master's degree, and then what happens? When do you go abroad? When do you move? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I actually had the first time I actually moved abroad was when I was 19. I just enrolled in university and I was looking for a summer job. In my home city, Lappeenranta in Finland, and I was looking for a job in one of the sort of public sector offices in my city. And they said, well, listen, and they said, well, listen, we don't have anything, but we have a representation office in Brussels, right? It's like a Southeast Finland representation office to the EU, and they're looking for an intern. Are you interested? I said, sure. I interviewed, and 2 weeks later, I was in Brussels for 6 months. So I paused my studies for 6 months. I went to Brussels. The very first time, I was 19. I was living at home with my parents back in Finland, and this was the first time that I had like lived abroad and by myself. And I was very much encouraged actually to do that by my parents, because I was going to say no to that opportunity because I was so afraid. I was like, well, I've never lived alone. This is like Brussels. I don't speak French. Like, I'm not going to go. And my mom was like, of course you're going to go. What are you talking about? This is a great opportunity. And we even had like a bit of an argument. I said, why are you like pushing me out here? Like,
you're kicking me out. You're kicking me out.
And they say, yeah, we are, because you should really go. And, they say your parents know you so well, right? I mean, that was very true, because I think that they felt, they saw me, they felt like this was going to be an amazing opportunity for me that would open so many doors and that I would enjoy. And then I went, I kind of jumped in there. I obviously loved it. It was an amazing opportunity to be kind of at the center of where everything was happening. And it was an amazing opportunity to also grow up and become, an adult and be responsible for yourself and all that. So that was great. I came back after 6 months, then finished my studies. And just before I finished the studies, I also went to Germany to do my exchange studies. I majored in international marketing, and we have like an exchange period that I had to do. So I went to Stuttgart.
Did you learn how to speak German there, or you already knew how to speak?
I studied it, right? So, I mean, whether I knew how to speak, I don't know, but I theoretically knew it. So then I went there, to prep the skills as well, to do the studies, came back, literally graduated, and then moved to Berlin. And really, I always wanted to have an international career, especially after my experience in Brussels. I sort of saw how much bigger the world is. And this is also where I started maybe saying, do I want to be a politician in Finland, or do I want to go conquer the world? Like, all these thought processes started shaping up. And so after graduation, I went to Berlin, moved there, and literally started from scratch. I didn't know, I in Finland, I would have had a lot of opportunities just through the networks that I had created, right? As for all of us, if you grow up somewhere and you study somewhere, you have a lot of networks. If you are good and smart, and you'll have opportunities, you wouldn't find it difficult to find a job. But then you move somewhere in Berlin where you have to, interview in German, and there was a relatively high unemployment rate back then in Berlin, and I was a fresh grad with not a lot of relevant experience. So I really struggled for a couple of months to find a job there, and then actually landed an internship, some kind of marketing manager internship at a media company there, like a small media company. And they paid 500 euros a month, which is now equivalent to like $500, right? So that was like nothing. After taxes, that was even less. And obviously for me, someone who has like a master's in economics and business administration, it was a little bit of a hit to my ego, I'm not gonna lie. But at the same time, I figured it's better to do something than to do nothing at home, right? So I took it.
Absolutely.
And what I got out of that, which is literally I was able to actually prep my language skills. I was able to, get friends and feel like I'm doing something that's not the easy route. A lot of my friends went to work for, IBMs and Microsofts and whatever, because they had internship opportunities there while they were students. So they kind of continued on that path. And I started from scratch. And that was kind of, the first time after graduation, I started completely from scratch in a new country. And later on, I have done that many times over, but that was kind of the first time.
Okay. And now walk us through then the progression of your career a little bit. You don't have to necessarily spend, give us the full overview on each thing, but just a little bit of the career and how it kind of travels into what you're doing now. If you don't mind, go for it.
Yeah, so I spent 6 months in Berlin, and after that, I actually had an opportunity to move to Singapore in Asia. I've
Wow.
never been to Asia before, and my then boyfriend had a chance to go there for 6 months for work. I said, "Listen, I'll come as well. I'll take a look. I'll see what opportunities it brings, and maybe if there's something interesting, career-wise for me, we'll see how things go. And if not, we can always come back to Europe."
Yeah. Yeah. Why not?
So
You already got checking off countries by the list. Check. Why not go?
exactly. And
Yeah.
it's another
Yeah.
adventure, right? And I mean, so I said, "Man, let's go." Went to Singapore, and I do have to say that, like, again, they're starting from scratch, new culture, new country, new
Language.
everything, right? New language. Well, they did speak English. That's one of the 4 official languages. But then, you still have, a lot of people speak Mandarin, and it's just a whole different world, right? And again, I went there with no job, so I had to do the whole thing again. You go apply, whatnot. So in a few months' time, I actually then, landed a job at a media intelligence company. This is really where my professional career for real started. I, got to work in sales, really loved it, and got to work with tech, with software, with companies that were looking to find how the media is writing about them in the press. So I kind of got a little
Okay.
bit to work with marketing managers, brands, how they perceive their messaging in the public and so on. So it was very, very interesting. Great sales school. I did that for 3 years. Ended up becoming a sales manager. I was very good at what I did. But
I
this
believe
is
it.
when
You have the energy and personality for it. I believe it. You're just like, hey,
I
sign right here, sign right here, sign on the line
sign
once you've
here,
got
and then I'll tell you what to sign up for.
it.
No, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. But then really during that time, at that time, I really wanted to progress, obviously, in my career, go further. I didn't have an opportunity to do that in this particular company.
This was
And
at
at that,
Meltwater Group. This is
correct,
Meltwater
this
Group.
was at
Were
Melbourne.
you
Yes.
did you go to this? Were you going to the CEO saying, "Hey, man, I want to move up. I want to move up. Like I need more."
I saw the CEO maybe once. We had at
Oh,
that point, I think maybe like almost 1,000 employees. So like he
I
didn't
see.
know who I
Okay,
was. I was
okay,
like, okay.
okay,
But
okay.
I didn't want to become a managing director, and it just was not a slot available. I kind of got a little tired to just do sales. You're kind of doing, the same thing over and over. And it was hard. Like it was like cold calling every day, have monthly quotas. You hit the quotas. It's all out there. Everybody can see if you're doing good or not. Like it's a lot of pressure. And I enjoyed it for a period of time. And after that, I'm like, well, now I need something else, right? New challenges, something different, more responsibility. And it wasn't, available in that company. And so that's when I started entertaining thoughts of maybe I'll just leave and maybe I'll just do something of my own because I've kind of had by that time, and again, kind of going back to what I had done throughout my sort of young life, I started to understand that I may have some tendencies, and to be very entrepreneurial, and I might actually be good at that. I didn't know what I was going to do, so I quit. I sort of for a year plus, I just worked as a one-woman show, trying to help Nordic companies expand to Southeast Asia, and I helped them do sales because that's what I loved. And it wasn't a startup; it wasn't a real company. It was just me doing that, sending them an invoice for the work done, and kind of trying to figure out my next move. And
Okay, so
that led
let's
me,
pause. Let's
yeah,
pause right there for the
okay,
listeners. Yeah. Oh, no, that's a good. So it's a good because so many people, so many aspiring entrepreneurs. I think this is a good turning point, right? In this case, you're like, okay, I know I want to do my own thing. I don't necessarily have that mapped out yet, but I know I can grab some clients, maybe one or two clients, and make a decent living as a consultant. I'll throw this under an LLC or whatever. I'm not sure I'm ready to build a brand yet. I don't have a brand plan, but I can pay the rent and I can grab a couple of consultants and start to do my own thing and see how this goes. Did you have a client? Was your first client in the bag before you quit your job, or you said you took like a year, or did it take a year to get your first client, or you had one right away?
I had one relatively quickly. So I
Okay.
quit not having a client, and it was sort of
Mm.
as a result of a conversation that I'd had with someone and I was like, you know what? Because I had been thinking about that, and then there was like a tipping point happened, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, this
Did you
is it.
did you
And
did you
I,
have a little nest? Did you have a little nest egg in the bank? Did you have like a little? I got this
no,
little pile of
I
cash.
still, well, I was still with that same boyfriend back then, so that'll
Okay.
help a little bit, right? Like
Okay. Okay.
you have another person who's bringing in some income, so it wasn't as scary.
Okay.
But it was still for someone who's like an achiever and high achiever, right? It was a big
And
deal to
super
just
independent. And super independent.
yes.
Like depending on the boyfriend's income, you're like, no, I can't. No.
Was not appealing to me at all. But it was less appealing to stay at the job that
Understood.
wasn't motivated by. So I quit, and
Yeah.
then obviously was very motivated to get my first client. And to be honest, I don't remember. I think it was through just some connections that I built in Singapore
Okay.
that I
Okay.
found someone, and I started saying, "Hey, this is what I do." And somebody said, "Oh, we got someone who wants to come in here. Do you want to work with them?" And so that's how it started. And I got a few more clients just through word of mouth. I didn't do
All right.
anything. It
All
was
right.
very small scale, right? Figuring shit out basically. That's kind of that
Yeah.
period
And
of
this was
time.
slush. This was slush.
No,
This was pine cone.
not such. Yes, that's what it was
This
called.
was a pine cone. Pine cone. Why'd you
Correct.
call it pine cone?
You know what? I don't even remember anymore. But it was somehow had some kind of link to like Finland, because Finland has a lot of like trees. What do you call them in English that have pine cones? Pine
Pine
trees?
trees.
I
Pine
guess
trees. Yeah.
pine trees. Finland has a lot of pine trees, so that's
I,
sort of how
I see.
it came about.
All right. All right. So you're doing
Yeah.
some consulting. All right. So you're liking it. You got some clients. Okay. All right. And then
Yes,
go
but I
ahead.
feel like it's not like big enough, right? I feel like, yeah, this is, me just working and whatnot, right? But that got me a chance to, build some networks and get to know a little bit of the Singapore sort of startup ecosystem. And I started
Mhm.
realizing that it was very kind of vibrant, starting to boil beneath the surface. But, as an Asian country, it was a very top-down society, right? So
Yes.
there's not a lot of kind of grassroots movements, or there's not a lot of, hey, do things differently. It's like, you want to be a lawyer, a doctor, or a banker, you're doing great in life. If you do something else, you're kind of not, it's not considered, sort of respectful enough for a lot of people, right? That has started to slowly change, and I could see that, there were like accelerators and co-working spaces popping up. And so I talked to a few people just in my networks and said, hey, there's an event, and obviously all the Finns would know this, but there's a big event in Finland called Slush. It's a huge event that originated in Finland, actually, like 10 plus years ago, which was
Uh-huh.
a gathering of entrepreneurial minded people. A lot of them
I
were
see.
students and
Okay.
entrepreneurs and techies, and just it's a kind of a very organic gathering. And then it grew into like a 20,000 person event where
Mhm.
they had investors flying down from Silicon Valley, and Al Gore was opening one of their conferences, and it was like huge, right? So everybody in Finland and in Europe, actually, if you're in tech and startup scene, you would know the event very well.
I see.
But
I
it's
see.
very grassroots driven. It's a non-for-profit driven by a lot of volunteers, and so I started saying, hey, something like such could be great for Singapore. And so then I got connected to the team at Slush in Helsinki, and we kind of started some conversations that I heard that certain Singaporean sort of government agencies were actually very interested in having an event like that in Singapore,
I
because they
see.
realized
Okay.
that this is something that
Mm.
was needed. And so I said, you know what? I can do
I'll
it.
do it.
I'm gonna,
I'll do it.
I'll do it, right? I'll do it. And we had a lot of back and forth, and they were like, what are you doing? Have you ever run an event? I said, no. And they were like, what? What? But I said, listen, we're going to make it happen. We have some good partners already, so let's do this. And from the time they said, okay, to the time we had the first event was 3.5 months, right? So that was like
Whoa.
101 days.
Whoa.
It's insane. Knowing what I know
Wow.
now, I would have never done it ever,
Oof.
because it was the
Wow.
most
Wow.
hectic period of my life. And we
Plus,
had
plus you're
2,000
trying.
applicants.
Plus, you're trying to work a couple of consultants for Pinecone to pay the bills and set up this deal in Singapore for Slush.
Well, I dropped everything else. I was like, I'm
Okay.
full on
Woo.
Slush.
Yeah.
We're
All right.
doing
All
this.
right. Okay.
And it was a
Okay.
very, very hectic period of time, not just for me, but also when you start with nothing, you have to go, you have to recruit a team, you have to recruit volunteers, you have to figure out
Woo.
sponsors. I remember some companies started saying, oh, this could, sound interesting. We want to be a part of it. So send us your billing details. I'm like, oh, we need to open a bank account, right? Oh, we probably need to open an entity. Who's going to be what? Like all these things, and then so much stress. And I remember for like 2 months before the event, I did not sleep a single night through. I was waking up with like all sorts of thoughts and anxiety, and just it was not just because obviously we were doing something on a very tight schedule, but because it was a very public thing, right? I mean, we had made announcements that Slush is coming to Singapore, and we're partnering with some Singapore government agencies, because obviously there you can't really do anything without partnering with the government. And so you're kind of under a magnifying glass of what is going to come out of all this. So there was a nice little additional pressure from that. And
were they paying you? It wasn't a volunteer position, was it?
so nobody paid us a single cent apart from what we could actually gather through ticket sales and sponsorships, right? So nobody gave me a chunk of money and said, go do this. That would be fun. But they said, great, hey, we are with you and we support you, but we don't have budget to start, opening up and doing events all over the world.
And you're not going to get payroll every 2 weeks. If you make any money on this deal, you can take whatever's left at the end. You can take a little bit. That was the deal.
Correct. That was the deal. And that was the deal that I had to sell to other people who were going to come and help me. I said, hey, we're doing this. Everybody got excited. I said, here's the thing though. You're not getting paid unless it's going to be a huge success, and unless we're going to have some leftover money after we pay the vendors and the production company and everybody else. It was definitely.
I can just hear the speech. I can hear the speech like, "Hey guys, look, we're doing this thing in Singapore. It's going to be so much fun. It's going to be so cool. It's going to be huge. It's going to be a great experience. Listen, I don't know how much money you're going to make. I don't have any idea when I can pay you. I may not be able to pay you anything, but come this way. Let's go."
That's literally, I think, the first real entrepreneurial experience, because this is how it works, right? Okay. And then there were enough crazy people who said, okay, I'm in, let's do this. And I remember we went to like the first, so we started kind of spreading the word by going to different smaller little gatherings, events, and talking about, Slush, and hey, do you want to join as a volunteer, be a part of the team? And I remember in the beginning, it was like, how many here has heard about Slush? And like one hand goes up and it's like the person that just recruited, right? So I'm like, damn. And so you kind of had to start sharing the story from scratch. But then by the end, so we ended up doing 3 events. So the first one was a big success. We had a lot of great press. And so we ended up doing 3 events in consecutive years. And so the 3rd year, you never had to ask anybody, have you heard of it? Everybody had heard of it. Everybody wanted to be a part of it. So easy to
Congratulations. Congratulations. Great. Congratulations. That's huge. That's huge. I mean, you built a startup basically. I mean, yeah, Slush existed, but you built that in Singapore. Okay, great for you. Awesome. Huh? The 3rd year, you actually paid yourself a decent amount of money. You're now your boyfriend's like, thanks a lot. I'm glad you're finally making money now. Stop living off me or what?
Well, listen, I don't know. Decent. I wouldn't say it was a decent amount of money, but I would say it was something. It was something. And so, but yeah, you're right. It wasn't really it was like a startup, but it wasn't really mine, right? First of all,
I understand.
Profit, and it wasn't really mine. And so by the 3rd year, I said, you know what, this is obviously a lot of work, and I don't mind the work, but it's never going to be my thing, right?
Understood. Yes.
I'd love to now go and build something of my own, because there's no way I'm going to go back to working for anybody. I'm not going to go back to a corporate. Forget about that CMO of Nike. They can find another CMO because I'm not available anymore. And so I said, I want to build a startup because I'd also been surrounded by so many incredible startups and entrepreneurs.
You had the bug,
right?
You had the virus, you had the bug. Now you got the entrepreneurial bug. It's never going away, especially after you built what you built in Slush. You're like, okay, now I have to do my own thing.
Exactly. And so that's what I decided doing. And I actually joined a program by an early stage VC called Antler in Singapore, where, they gather like 100 people from different walks of life that are entrepreneurial, wanting to build businesses. And it was an opportunity to meet a potential co-founder, right? Through like, experimenting with a bunch of different people and a bunch of different ideas. So I joined the program, and that's how I'm my co-founder actually. And that's how, during that time, my current startup Zvook was actually born. And
whose idea was it? Well, who's the co-founder and whose idea was it? Or did you guys, was it together? Was it together? Like you're having beers and you're like, hey, I got this idea. Like, tell me about it.
No. So the idea was originally mine. I actually had a whole bunch of different ideas in the media space before. And then And I love listening to podcasts. I'm not big on audiobooks because they're too long for me. I love the kind of conversational podcasts. And so I'd always listen to some. And then, me and my three friends decided to start a podcast, right? Let's do a side hustle. Let's start a podcast and let's drink wine and talk about business and leadership.
Great.
We're all, women, and we're like, let's do it. And who wouldn't want to listen to it? And I said, great. So we booked a trip to record a podcast, as you do. And I said, hey, let me try to find some sponsors, because who wouldn't want to sponsor such great content? And so I went online and I tried to find a platform that would help me find advertisers, just like you do on social media and so many other places, right? Like a marketplace, connect or something. And I couldn't find one. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, well, why does this not exist? And then I ran into a lot of articles and research about podcasting. And this was, spring 2019. So this was really when podcasting started really becoming a big boom, and Spotify made some moves into podcasting. And so I read a bunch of things and I got really excited. I said, how come you can buy anything online with a click these days except a podcast ad? That's weird, right? Let's build something that makes that possible. And so this was the idea that I kind of got through that whole process. And I met my co-founder because I have not coded a single line in my life. I'm not a coder. I'm not excited about that. But I wanted to build a tech company, so I needed someone to build it. And so I met my co-founder, who's now our CTO, and who's actually responsible for building the product that you see out there right now.
And the co-founder is? Can you? I'm sure that
his name is Malik Ali Mohamedov. So he is in Belgium. Originally from Uzbekistan, and now lives in Belgium.
Now his LinkedIn profile says he's a musician. So are those his guitars on the wall?
He wishes that those were his guitars.
Okay. So you find your co-founder at an incubator event, which is not the easiest thing to do. And traditionally, not necessarily safe because you haven't known them that long. They're not like you haven't known them for like 10 years. So sometimes you are taking somewhat of a gamble, right? Because you're like, oh, this person is new in my life. I mean, Malik seems cool, but I haven't known him for years. That was a risky move.
It's a huge risk.
Huge risk. Huge risk. But he's a coder. He knows how to develop and all that.
Yes, and he had a great reputation. So when we met we didn't meet at an event. It was a program, so it was like a 2.5 months long, the whole program. But we only worked together for literally, I think, 3 weeks before we pitched this idea, because it was towards the end of the program. So we got together. I said, hey, this is the idea that I have. And he had a tremendously good reputation among our cohort as being the best builder in the cohort. So obviously, me being so competitive and a winner, I was like, I want to work with that guy, right? And so we got together and explained my idea. He was like, great, let's work together for a couple of weeks and see how it goes. And actually, after a couple of days, we were like, you know what? Let's do this. If we can pitch this idea to this VC that was running the program, and if we get an investment, then let's go build this. That's exactly what happened. So we had literally worked together for 3 weeks. We had a slide, a pitch deck. We had one client. We kind of hustled together like an example client, obviously very manually, right? And presented the world. And here's the catch: we said, if we get this funding, it was like a small initial check. We said, actually, the market for this is not in Southeast Asia; it's in America. So we're going to move to America.
When you say small, can you share? Wait, can you share? Was the award 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000?
100,000.
Okay, 100,000.
That was an investment.
But until the pitch, you had zero. It was just you and Malik was zero. You had zero.
We had zero. We had zero. We had an idea and a pitch deck, and a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of belief. And so once we got
Hold on. Hey, Malik, let's go for some beers. Listen, I got this idea. Okay, listen, have a couple of glasses of wine, and then I'm going to tell you about this idea. Now, listen, I don't know how to code. You're going to have to build the whole damn thing, but I got the vision, and I can't pay you anything. I have no idea if this is going anywhere, but let's go do this pitch together, and if we win, we'll figure it out.
Does it sound familiar? Actually, let me tell you how it happened. It happened in an elevator. we were going up to a conference room to discuss. We go into the elevator, and we get stuck.
Oh, that's a
elevator. I
sign.
kid you
That's a
not.
sign. That's a sign.
That's what we thought. That's what we thought. We're like, if we're getting out of this, if somebody's gonna
That
come
is a
rescue us,
sign.
we were
Wow.
definitely building this. So that's what
How
happened.
about that? You know what? All the corny little things aside. I mean, I kind of believe things like that happen for a reason. And I'm a believer. Like there's little
Me too.
signs like that in life that point you in certain directions. I believe it. I believe it. Wow. Okay,
Me too.
that's cool. I'm glad you shared that. Okay, so you got the 100,000. You won.
We got 100,000, and 2 weeks from then, we were on the plane on our way to New York. And I remember literally 2 weeks. I packed my bags to open the market because we knew that in Singapore and Southeast Asia, what we were building wasn't going to be commercially viable because of the size of the podcasting market, and nobody was really doing podcast advertising there.
Understood. Understood. So you're flying to New York now to sell the product. Was the product ready for market? Was it ready for customers?
Absolutely not. We still just had the pitch deck, right? So we came here and we said, hey, we're going to basically move to New York and start building the company here. We're going to look for additional investors. We're going to look for, customers. The market is here. We need to be where the market is. So this is what we have to do. I packed my bags.
$100,000 is not going to last long, especially if you have to move to New York. So you had to raise cash again. So you came to New York with the mission to raise another angel round or seed round or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
And we were
What'd you do with the boyfriend? What'd you do with the boyfriend?
Well, to guess. He's still in Singapore, but he's no longer is no longer part of my life.
Hey, Johnny, thanks a lot for supporting me all these years while I was chasing this stuff. Now that I got the $100,000, I got to go see it. No, I'm just giving you a hard time. I'm sure that's not how it went down.
No, but it's interesting, right? I mean, it was a time in my life where so many changes were happening, like for real, right? Like you go through this spot where you're like, I want this. I want to build my own startup. I've been thinking about that for a while now. I'm ready. I found a co-founder who got a check. And now I have to move. And then at the same time, things happen in your private life where you're like, you know what? It's probably for the best, actually. And everything does happen for a reason, right? But it was a very big thing to do because I literally packed 2 suitcases, came here, didn't know anybody, right? We didn't have to have any networks. We had a very limited amount of money and no plan really beyond we're going to make this work, right? And we did not know that the pandemic was around the corner either. So that was a whole, but we came here and I remember on the plane, I was sitting and I looked at him and I was like, I've known this guy for literally 5 weeks. I'm on the plane with this dude and I now own a company with him and we got an investor in that company and we're going to the other side of the ocean to actually
risk. Ooh, man, that is so risky. I mean, he could still be like a serial killer for all you know. I mean, he could still be like some crazy guy. Can I ask how much can you share? I don't know if you're comfortable sharing, but how did you guys split? All right. So the 100,000, they got a piece. Can you share how much they got? And if you aren't comfortable, that's fine. But then how much does Malik get and you get? Who's the owner? Who's in control is my question.
Yeah. Well, I can share that. So we were very fair in kind of our co-founder split. And so we are equal co-founders. That's what we agreed from day one, right? Because he's building and I'm going to do the business side and, there's only 2 of us. So that's, yes, we're equal.
But one of you plus the VC firm vote is in control, basically, if you look at the cap table. Is that accurate?
Well, we together we've since gotten new investors on board. We still own the majority of. Oh,
is the original VCs? They're out. They're already done. You bought them out.
They're not. No, they're not out. We've just added other investors into the mix, right? As you grow and as you look for more funding, you kind of add more people to your cap table. But we're still obviously we're very early stage. We're still majority owners. So
good for you. Good for you. Keep control as long as you can. But of course, each time you take cash, you'd get diluted just a little bit. Of course. Now all of a sudden, you're becoming an expert on raising cash and cap tables. So you're like, okay, now this is my new job.
Correct. I mean, whether you want it or not, listen, there are two ways to build it, right? Like some people want to bootstrap and they want to take small steps. I've always
Yes.
been very, very excited about taking in money and then growing fast and scaling, right? Because, especially in the media scene, like you have to be quick. You
Yes.
wait too long and the market changes, new
Mhm.
competitors come in, right? That's inevitably gonna happen. So for us, it was important that we take in the money and we take the right support, and then we go and we, make some waves.
Move quickly because you can't really patent this stuff. I mean, what you're doing is great, but somebody else is going to do it. So you're right. It's the speed to market philosophy, right? It's speed to market, moving fast as you can.
100%. And also, I mean, idea is worth nothing, right? Everybody's got ideas. So many people have great ideas. Execution is what actually gets you there. So when people are a little bit sometimes worried about sharing their ideas, somebody's going to steal them. I know nobody's going to steal them. And if you're great at actually executing, you're still
Yes.
going to, be the best and beat them. So I wouldn't be worried about that at all.
Bingo, bingo. Great advice. I really want to just stop right there for the aspiring entrepreneurs. Make sure you pay attention to what Anna just said. Most of the time, unless you're this scientist who's created this brand new patented super secret thing, most of the time it's speed to market and then how well you execute to keep those customers before the competitors can catch you. And then if you want to raise it fast enough and then, cash out and somebody buys you, great. I mean, you're absolutely right. And you don't strike me as the type of person that moves around slow too often.
No, and which is why the pandemic was so hard for
Oh, I
me
bet it was,
personally.
especially in New York.
Yes, yes. And this
Oh,
was literally this was like maybe 6 months after we'd gotten here, or something like 6, 8 months after we'd gotten here, and it was hard. And we had not raised a single cent in that first 8 months, right? So we were out of money. The
oh my
pandemic
gosh.
hit. I was quarantining. Malik went back to Asia for a little bit, and we literally had to sort of pause a little bit and be like, "Are we still doing this? Like, what?" The whole year almost had gone by without additional money, and we were still only just getting started. Like it didn't go quite as we had planned, right? And building relationships in a new place like New York did take time.
Yeah, yeah.
But we decided to pursue, and we kept speaking with some investors, and then one of them, who's now our big investor and VC from Europe, actually from Denmark, reached out, and they wanted to look into the audio space. We had great conversations, and they offered us a check, and we said, let's roll. And so that was
There
kind of
had
our
to
VC.
there had to be a few nights in New York where you're laying in bed going, "What the fuck? I mean, what did I do? I mean, I got no
Literally
money.
my words.
I'm out of money. I'm in New York. The pandemic's here. I still barely know Malik. Like, holy crap!" And you call your mom and dad, you'd be like, "Yeah, I might need to move home pretty soon." No, I'm just playing.
I had that thought process though. I was like, what am I gonna do? Maybe I'm gonna go, you know what I mean? And my parents had moved out of Finland by that time. They lived in Spain. I was like, maybe I'll go live in Spain. What the hell? I've been to so many countries now. I don't even care where I am anymore. But I definitely had that
Oh,
thought process, and it was, and one of the feelings that I really felt, which is not common for me because I'm such an extroverted person and I've been this high achiever my whole life. I felt very lonely. I was like,
mhm.
I didn't
I
have a
see it.
lot of,
Yes,
friends obviously
yes,
here. And then,
yes.
I wasn't sure what we were even doing. Was this going to work? There was this
Plus,
financial
you're
pressure.
single. Plus, you're single. You
Exactly.
don't have any. You don't. You're like in your New York apartment. You're like by yourself. I can't get out. I got no partner here. I was like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah. I mean, parts of that, being single didn't suck. I mean, before the pandemic, right? It was fine. But obviously during the lockdown, yeah, there were a lot of
Mm, mm,
very,
mm,
kind
mm.
of not great uplifting thoughts. But the one thing that I think kept me really going was just that made it easier was that this was my choice, right? Life
Got it.
didn't happen to me. Nothing happened
Mm,
to me. And I was not
mm.
feeling sorry for myself because I chose this. And I said, I chose this. And in some really weird way, even amongst all that, I was like, I'm still happier than I was in my previous life doing something that wasn't mine, right? So,
Love that. I love that. I love that for aspiring entrepreneurs. That is so true. Like even during the tough times, even during the downturns of being a startup entrepreneur, You're choosing that. It's your destination, that you're paving in front of you, and you have the power to run away from it if you want to.
Yeah.
And it's your choice. And that is so uplifting and powerful in and of itself. I couldn't agree more. I think that's a very important thing to highlight, is because when you're an employee and you're in a shitty situation, you're trapped there. It's not your call. Other people are kind of telling you what needs to be done. When you're the entrepreneur, you're paving the way, and there's so much exhilaration in that. So I appreciate you saying that. Do this. I know I'm, gosh, man, I could keep you for another hour because I'm already going to
I love the conversation.
Let's do. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that, Anna. Yeah, the power to choose your own destiny. You know what I told somebody the other day? I said, listen, our recruiting firm, Rider, our day job is a recruiting firm, and the podcast is a side marketing spin for us, right? So as a recruiting firm, we'll probably do 2.3 million this year, and we got about 30 people involved in the company now. And but I'm still not paying myself anywhere near what I was making as an executive for other companies, right? But I told somebody, I'm like, listen, man, if you called me tomorrow and said, hey, we want you to move to Detroit and be the CEO for XYZ company, and we'll pay you $500,000 a year if you'll just shut down Riderflex, I would be like, nope, ain't doing it, bro. There is no amount of money, really. I mean, because the freedoms of being an entrepreneur is, you can't put a number on it for me, because, by the way, I'm a Leo too.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. And I'm like,
I hear that.
I told my co-founder, I said, if I ever have to email another human being and ask them if I can go on vacation, I will shoot myself, because I'm never doing that.
Absolutely.
I'm never doing that again.
Absolutely. And another thing, people kept asking me, especially during that time, even sometimes after, but especially during that first kind of year before we got additional funding. Okay, so how long are you going to do this? Like, until, what's your plan B? And how long are you giving yourself? And I never really understood that question. I understand that there are sometimes people who need that. They need to give some kind of a timeline for themselves. But I think that if you have that, you're probably never really gonna make it big, right? Because that change might be just around the corner. If you're an entrepreneur at heart, like I have learned that I am, I don't have a plan B, right? I don't have it. I am going to make this work. That's my only, way forward. And so I didn't really understand those questions, but also I feel like that was what also kept me going, right? Because when you have your back against the wall, you start being resourceful and you start seeing things in a different way, and it is stressful. But if you're someone who takes that stress and channels that into creativity or energy or momentum or motivation or whatever, then you're good. And not everybody can do that, and I respect that. People have different approaches, but for me, it worked exceptionally well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So you were at.
So yeah, tell me about Zvook, Anna, because hey, I have a podcast, and I'm looking for sponsors too, so I could be your client. So yeah, give me the pitch.
Great. So we are the marketplace for host-read podcast ads. We basically help brands find the most relevant podcasts that their customers listen to and book host recommendations with just a few clicks. The same way you would go and book anything else online with just a few clicks, you can now do with host-read podcast ads. And then for the podcasters, we help them be discoverable, right? So there are many companies out there that could be a great fit for your podcast, right? For this particular podcast, but they've never heard of you necessarily. Once they go into our marketplace, you're able to, with a few keywords, actually find your podcast. It pops up as a great recommendation based on the content and relevancy, and they can just click a button and literally purchase host recommendations from you about their brand.
You're a matchmaker. Basically, you're a matchmaker.
Correct. Correct.
You're connecting the person that wants to be on a show to the show, or you're connecting the person that wants to have a ad or a sponsorship clip on the show.
Well, right now it's ads and sponsorships. It can be interviews if that's what your show is selling. So you can choose, you as a show are actually able to list whatever it is that you're selling. And we're not necessarily, we're not connecting you per se. We're actually allowing the brand to just book it on the spot, because
Just
by
book it.
way of you being on the platform, you basically, that's what you agree to, and then you get notified. And obviously you can still say yes or no. Most of them would say yes because it's a great match, and off you go.
I see. And so I'm not paying as the podcast host of the Riderflex show. I'm not paying you. You're getting paid by the person that wants to spot. I see. Is there qualifications? Like, do I have to have so many listeners? Do I have to have so many shows? What's the qualifications to be on the list?
There's not, you have to have a podcast and you have to have an episode out. That's literally the minimum qualification. And that's really the problem we're solving, right? I mean, majority of the advertising money right now floods into big podcasts, and they're also being paid by big spenders, right? Squarespace, Casper Mattress, and Helix, and all these guys, right? We've all heard them. However, there are tons of smaller companies that might have $1,000, $10,000, $1,500, right? That want to spend it right now. Their only way to spend it easily is to go buy Facebook ads and Instagram and Google, and they'll take your money. They'll take your $200 and they'll turn that into massive profits. We believe that that money should actually go to audio creators, podcasters like, yourself and so many others. And with a lot of, networks, there is minimum listenership requirements. And, if you have 2,000 listeners or 1,000 listeners or even 700 listeners, they aren't any less valuable than somebody else's 2 million listeners, right? It's just less of them. So we help brands buy more of those shows at scale, smaller shows, with the click of a button, so that they get the reach, but they also get the relevance.
I love the idea. It's really such a great idea, because a lot of the people that do come on the podcast are startup to small, mid-sized business owners and entrepreneurs. You're absolutely right. And what more perfect place to pitch their product? Does the technology set up to where, okay, so I got the show, right? So for the Riderflex show, somebody goes on and they're like, okay, he interviews entrepreneur startups. Yeah, we want to advertise on his show. Do they send you the commercial spot and then like you send it to me, or do I send you my podcast and you like put it in there? How does the programming and tech part work?
Yeah, so we don't do the ad insertion. The ad insertion is done by your host. So depending on which host provider, you can either have it baked into your episode. So it's always going to be there. It's like baked into the file, and it's always forever going to be there. Or you can dynamically insert it. You can record it separately as Steve, and then you just insert it dynamically, which means also that you can take it out after a period of time and insert another one. And then make sure that whenever people listen to any of your episodes, even if they're older, that same ad spot is being inserted in them for a period of time, right? So you can kind of keep changing the advertisers, and it's a great way for you to work with more advertisers and obviously make more money.
Do I get paid for every single episode that their ad plays, or is it a one-time?
So you get paid based on your listenership, and the payments are in podcasting, in general podcast advertising, is using CPM, so cost per mil or cost per 1,000 listener, right? So if you have 1,000 listener, that's what you're being paid for. Then you have 2,000 and so on.
How do you know how many listens I have? Or do I give you my, okay, well, here's how many people listen on LinkedIn?
Yeah, when you sign up to the platform, we'll ask you all this data, and you'll verify that, and then.
And what if that same ad is playing on a show that recorded, and 6 months later it's getting more and more and more and more hits? Do I start getting paid more and more and more, or no?
So this is the interesting part. The attribution for in podcasting works usually it's 30 days from the day that the ad is aired, and after that is considered to be the long tail, because you can't keep a year after. Maybe this company doesn't exist anymore. Maybe this company has changed their, address, whatnot. So you can't really go back to the math for that payment. But 30 days is usually the attribution window. So anything within 30 days would actually be contributing to the payment that you get.
And do you prefer the Joe Rogan method, where he's just kind of reading the spot and it goes in, or do you prefer the company to have this fancy pre-baked advertising spot that we slot in?
So we only do host-read ads, meaning the host always reads the ad, right? We are big proponents. However, you can insure that. You can pre-produce, pre-read it, insert it
Okay.
into your
Okay.
episode or just read. But what we really encourage people to do, and companies and hosts, is don't read a script. Like don't
Yeah, I
read word
understand.
by
Totally.
word. Be
Totally.
authentic, right? Really
Yes.
talk about the product or the service that works
That
the best.
Hey, that matches the style of my podcast. That's perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you'd be a great advocate.
Yeah,
So
totally get it. Okay, very good. All right. I love it. So for anybody interested, either people that want to sponsor the product, or podcast hosts like me that want to be involved, do they just go to zvook.co and there's a contact page, fill it out?
correct. Well, you just literally, you can log in. If you're a brand, you can log in instantly. It doesn't cost you anything, and you can start looking for different podcasts. You can start exploring.
Cool.
It's super easy. And same for the podcast. You just log in, claim your podcast, and it literally guides you step by step what you need to put in. In 10 minutes, you've set your profile. You're good to go.
Love it. And then what's your business model? You just take a piece, I guess. You just take a percentage.
For now, yes, but we have some really interesting ideas of changing things around a little bit and make it even more interesting for the brands.
I got all kinds of ideas already.
Well, we need to talk about that.
I love the idea. It's so, I mean, this whole
Thank
time,
you.
I have, so what I've currently been doing is I have a sponsor, the same sponsor clip on the front of every podcast that we do for a guest. And we're doing that for them because they're a marketing firm that we do stuff for them. They do stuff for us, and they're a sponsor. But I have thought, like, wow, how does this work if we want to do other sponsors? How do we charge them, all this and that? I'm guessing it's easy to get paid, sign up, the money transfer. I'm sure you have all that figured out.
Super easy.
I love it.
We're obviously happy to walk you through it.
Anna, are you paying yourself yet? How are you living? How are you eating, Anna? How are you eating ramen noodles, or do you have revenue?
Yes.